Hello and good morning. Today's video tutorial is going to be the first of many video tutorials on the Junos operating system. And we're actually going to start at the beginning, which is you've maybe come into an environment as a system administrator, excuse me, or as a network engineer, or maybe you've acquired a Cisco or a Juniper EX-series switch, and you've got that switch, but you do not know what the root password is. And so the tutorial I'm doing is going to be on EX3200s. However, this will work on the EX8200, the EX2200, 3200, 42, and 4300 series switches. So basically what we're going to do is a password recovery so that we can get the root password. So as you can see here in the window to the left, if I type in root, and I believe I set it to Juniper 1. Let's see here. Okay, so there we go. So as you can see, the root password is set. But let's say that I did not remember the root password. So if I didn't remember the root password, we would want to follow these steps here on the right. And so the first one is to power the router off or the switch off by pressing the power button on the front panel. Turn off the power management device. Turn off the power to the management device, such as a PC or a laptop. And so I'm going to simulate the powering on and powering off of the switch. And we're going to go ahead and get it to step number 10 is where we're going to start off. So if I was here and I wanted to power the switch off, I could type in request system reboot. And this is going to reboot the switch for us. And then we're going to catch it when it reaches the prompt asking you to either hit enter to boot immediately or to hit the space bar to get to the command prompt. And so we're going to go ahead and let this Junos switch, this EX3200, reboot, and we're going to catch it and we're going to hit the space bar, and this actually takes a short period of time here, probably about 15 to 20 seconds. And so I'm actually going to be doing a series of introductory Junos videos, talk about configuring the switch, how to configure the switch, different options that you can use when configuring. As you can see, we are running the Junos version 12.3 R 6.6 on this switch. And so it's going to come up here pretty quickly and ask me to hit the space bar as it's going through its boot process. And there we go. So you can see where it says hit enter to boot immediately or the space bar for a command prompt. And so we've got the command prompt now. So from the command prompt, the next thing that we would want to do is we're going to go ahead, it shows the OK prompt up there, but we're going to go ahead, if I were to type a question mark and hit enter, you can see the commands that we can run, and boot is one of those commands. So I'm going to say boot-s. And so this is going to boot us into single user mode, which will allow us to enter the recovery mode. And so it's going to go ahead and go through its boot process, and there you go. It says enter the full path name of the shell or recovery for root password recovery. So we're going to go ahead and say recovery, because that's what we want to do. Now you'll notice here it says step 13 says enter configuration mode in the CLI and set the root password. So it's actually going to take us directly into the CLI. It will start the CLI for us, and then we just need to go into configuration mode. And these two steps here, it's very important to note that previous versions of the Junos did not immediately dump you into the CLI. You used to have to enter a command to get into the CLI after you issued the recovery command. But here with 12.3 R 6.6, it's actually going to go ahead and run the CLI for us, or start the CLI up for us, and then immediately transition us into the CLI. And from that point, we're going to go ahead and set the root password on the switch. So while we're waiting for the configuration to load here, A quick note, the Juniper EX-series switches are not too terribly expensive out on eBay. I did a quick search the other day. If you take a look here, you can see that the EX2200, which is kind of the low-end switch, you can pick these guys up for under $500 in most cases, depending on which models you're getting. Obviously, there's some people have some new ones out here that are brand new. But again, you may come upon one cheaper than that. I definitely would like to give a shout out to a very good friend of mine who was kind enough to set me up with two EX3200s, and that is Dave. And Dave is a great systems engineer at Juniper and has really enabled me to actually be able to even make these videos. So prior to this, I did not have any Cisco gear. So Dave, thank you very much, and I will definitely be making the most of it and be doing up as many Junos videos as I possibly can. All right, so let's come over here. You can see that it's doing some FIPS testing. And we're waiting for the process to complete. We've got some initialization of management services that's going to take place. And another note here over on the right hand side, you can see where it's going to talk about a best practice of using global setting groups, right? So the recommended best practice for configuring the root password is to leverage a configuration group. However, in this instance, we're just simply going to use the plain text password command where we set the system root authentication plain text password. So as you can see, it started the CLI for us, and so we are now the root user on this switch, right? And so something to keep in mind is that if you're going to try to recover the root password, whether you reload the switch or whether you power the switch off and then on, that if it's a production switch, while you're recovering the root password, you're definitely going to take a hit. So this is probably not something you want to do in the middle of the day in your production environment, and that's typically what we refer to as a resume generating event. So you definitely want to avoid that. All right, so we are the root user. We did not have to make any changes here. So it says once in the CLI, you'll need to enter configuration mode using the configure command to make any required changes. So for example, to reset the root password. And as you can see here, this is where I'm reading, is from the notes section. And so this is really nice, right? I mean, they literally give you the commands that you need to run. So the command or the root password prior to this was Cisco 123, and so now we're going to change that. So I would type in configure, and so we're entering configuration mode, set system root authentication plain text password, and now I'm going to type in Juniper 123 and Juniper 123, right? And I hit enter. Now a key here is we want to make sure that we commit the changes. If I exit out here, right, it might prompt me to save those changes, but you always want to make that save, make that commit after you make the change. So I'll type in commit, and these changes are now being written. And then it's going to come back, and I'm going to say exit, and it puts me back out to the CLI mode, and then I'm going to say exit. So I went from configuration mode to the CLI mode. Then here you can see you simply exit, and then at the prompt it's going to ask me to reboot. This says the router, but we're working on a switch. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say yes. Right, so we've changed the password to Juniper 123. We've made that recovery. And now what's going to happen is the EX3200 is going to reboot. I'm going to go ahead and pause here while it goes through the reboot process, and I'll come back as soon as it's done. Okay, so we're going to pick back up here where we left off, which is the EX3200. We've actually reset the root password, so now we can get into the switch. So from here, I would type in the login ID, which is going to be root. If I type the old password in, Cisco 123, You can see that that doesn't work. How about root and then root? No, that doesn't work either. All right, we're going to get the login prompt back. Let's go root, and how about Juniper 1, 2, 3? All right, fantastic. And then over here to the right, there was another link I wanted to show, and that's here, troubleshooting loss of the root password on the EX-series switch. And this actually walks you through some steps. So it's right here, after we type recovery, you'll notice it says enter configuration mode in the CLI. And it has you type CLI before you type config. And so this step was bypassed on 12.3 R6.6. It actually did this for us and literally put us right to the root prompt so that we could type in configure and then set system root authentication plain text password, where we reset the password, and the rest of the steps were the same. You have your commit out here, right? All right, so now we're in as root, so I can type in CLI, and I can get into the CLI without any issues at all. Okay, so this has been a quick video tutorial on how to recover or to reset the root password on an EX-series switch, a Juniper EX-series switch. I also have a switch that's running an earlier version of code. Let me switch the console connections out here really quick, right? And this is the second switch that that Dave was kind enough to pass along. So if I were to do a show configure, it'll show me the system configuration, and you can see that here is the encrypted password. And the Junos version here, I'm actually running 11.4 or 2.14. And so let's go ahead and let's take a look at what 11.4 is going to look like. And again, you probably should not be running 11.4. You should probably be in the 12.x branch at a minimum. So let's go ahead and request system reboot. And if I'm not mistaken, this is actually the switch that my iMac on which I'm doing this is connected. So let's see what happens here. So I'm going to go ahead and say request system reboot. Would you like to reboot the system? Yes. And so this system is going to go down. This system is also trunked. I have a trunk link running from this Juniper switch to my Cisco 3560, a little 8-port PoE capable switch that I have. And so let's pull up the switch there. And so here's that switch. And so let's see. Let me send it to its own window here. Oh, I didn't want to clone. We're going to send to a new window. So there we go. All right, so as this goes down, we'll see if we see any messages here that might get logged. All right, and so it's at the kernel. So usually when you see that /kernel, this is when you want to get ready, because then this is where you're going to see very quickly hit enter to boot immediately, or the space bar for the command prompt. So here we are at the loader prompt, right? You can see that this is accurate here, whereas this series of steps showed the prompt to be the OK prompt. I'm sorry, yeah, the OK prompt. All right, so we'll follow these guys here and see if with 11.x if this is accurate. So we'll say boot.s because we're going to boot into single user mode. And so now this switch is going to go ahead and do its thing. And no messages here. I may have come in too late to catch a message. I believe if, and this is on the Cisco side over here, so if I do a show run int GI09 is I believe the port. There it is, yeah. So if I do a show int GI09, you can see that the interface is down and the line protocol is down right now, and that's because we are going into single user mode here. And so from this prompt, if we look over here, we type recovery. So very similar, just a little different. So I'm going to go ahead and type recovery. And it's going to do a file system consistency check. It's going to make sure that all of the file systems are clean. And so with 11.x, What we might expect to see here is the user at switch prompt to get into the CLI, but let's see what it comes up with to allow us to reset that root password. And again, if you take a look while that's booting up, so I made a comment, this is an 11.4 or 2.14, and this was probably used a number of years ago. If you go to the Juniper recommended Junos versions, if you were to Google that, you would see Junos platforms download software and then the JTAC recommended Junos software version. So let's click on that. And this is definitely a while ago. So you can see here the 11.4. This was back in September of 2012, right? So this is definitely a dated version of the software. So I'm 11.4 R 2.14, and in September of 2012, so literally 2 years ago, this was the version that you were supposed to be running. So if I were to back up one step here, and let's come back up to the Juniper web page here. So we'll say by series, we're going to take a look at the EX series, and let's say we want the EX3200. All right. So the recommended release, and this is again the release notes, and you can see here where the MIBs, so forth and so on, but we want the software. So if you click on the software, you can see here that for the EX3200, the install package, so forth and so on, so we want to be 12.3, either R5, R6, R7, R1, and so I'm still looking for, and give me a second here, here we go, the JTAC Recommendations. So this is what I was looking for. So here's your JTAC recommended Junos software version. So for an EX3200 switch, right, we would want to be 12.3 R 6.6, and that would have been from 4 April 2014. So much more recent than the 11.4 release. So you'd want to be 12.3 R 6.6. Okay, so let's jump back here so you can see that we are, the prompt, excuse me, the CLI has been started for us again, right? So from this prompt, we're going to go ahead, we're already in the CLI, right? So it's allowed us to set the CLI, so we're going to say configure, and you're going to go through the same steps, right? So set system, root authentication, plain text password, and we're going to set it to Juniper 123, and then Juniper, whoops, I typed it wrong there, Juniper 123, and they, that's right, they don't match. So we'll have to run that command again. So set system, whoops, root authentication, plain text password, and we'll say Juniper 123, and then Juniper 123. We're going to commit this change, right? And then it's going to come back up. We're going to exit out from configuration mode. So we're going to go from Junos configuration mode back out to the CLI mode, and then here I'm going to type exit again, and it's going to ask us the same thing. Do you wish to reboot? And I'll say yes. All right. And so let's see over here on the switch to which this guy is trunked, right? This is a little Cisco 3560 over here. We should see some activity of the port coming up once the Juniper switch boots. And so again, taking a look at the password recovery steps, the prompts do differ a little from what we saw. You did not have to enter in, again, even with 11.4, you did not have to enter in the command CLI to get yourself into the CLI mode. We simply needed to type configure to get us into the Junos configuration mode. And so then again from there, we were able to run the same commands to reset that root password. All right, so we'll give this a couple seconds and see if that link comes back up for us. And in fact, I'll go ahead and pause here because this will take a couple of seconds. So I'll pause and we'll come back once this is completed booting. All right, and so the switch is up. I think I have logging to the console. I was just sitting here thinking about it as I was paused, that logging to the console, I believe I'd turn that off on the small 3560, so we're not going to see anything come up or down. However, if I do a show int gi 0/9 now, and it still shows down, and I am almost 100% certain that that is the port into which I am connected. I may have turned off, let's do show run, include logging, and let's see. So no, we should be, we should see some activity here. Let me pull this guy back up. So let's log in with our new root password over here on the Juniper EX3200, Juniper123. As you can see, we're up. I can go into CLI mode. And there is our prompt. If I do a show configure, it's going to show me our current configuration. Right, and the trunk link that I'm using here on the Juniper switch is Gigabit Ethernet 000. And let's take a look over here and see what this guy shows. So now it does show it's up and up. All right, so I just took it a couple seconds to bring it up and up for Spanning Tree to do its thing. All right, so this has been the first of what will be many Junos video tutorials. I'm going to try to keep these around the introductory level and then work our way up to the more advanced topics. And this was basically starting from the beginning, is trying to recover the root password on a switch so that you can get in there and then make additional changes. And that's where we're going to start up next. We're going to configure some users. We're going to talk about the configuration mode, how to enter the configuration mode, the different ways to do that. And so those will be some of the videos that you'll see coming up. All right, hopefully this video was of some help to you, and hopefully you have been able to recover your root password. All right, thanks for watching and have a great day.